bell of the privileged hour. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, I rise today on a matter of personal and collective privilege to honor the memory of 14 soldiers. Two of them, in fact, known to me, being both graduates of the Philippine Military Academy, who died in separate ambushes perpetrated by the New People's Army operating in Bohol more than a decade ago. I rise today to give honor and due recognition to the endless toil, ceaseless determination, and unparalleled heroism of our soldiers and policemen, who, day to day, serve and fight to protect our people and preserve our democratic way of life. On March 3, 2000, 6 soldiers and 4 militiamen were killed in an ambush by communist rebels in Barangay Santa Catalina, Sagbayan, Bohol. They were sent to reinforce a nearby Special Forces detachment in Barangay Balilihan that had come under attack from the NPA. Killed in the ambush were Second Lieutenant Socrates Ke, leader of the reinforcing team, Staff Sergeant Jaime Estrella, and Corporals Albert Concepcion, Adonis Isulan, Victor Danao, and Policarpio Pama. Also killed were militiamen Ricardo Luzon, Efren Prado, Eduardo Lomosbog, and Maximo Gahipas. Lieutenant Ke was barely 2 years out of PMA, 1 year ahead of me in the academy, and was only in his mid-20s when he met his cruel fate that day. According to the Cebuano newspaper The Freeman, in their report 2 days after, and citing statements from the survivors, after the initial hail of bullets, the rebels came down from the hills and finished off the soldiers before making off with their weapons. The newspaper went on to cite that in an ambush, the victims normally sustain gunshot wounds in their bodies. In this case, all the dead soldiers bore head wounds, meaning they were finished off at close range. Almost 3 years after that day, tragedy would again hit, but this time it would hit closer to home. On March 8, 2003, Lieutenant Ronnie Bungaos and 3 other Army soldiers were killed in an ambush while on their way back from patrol in Barangay Abaca, Mabini, Bohol. 7 other soldiers sustained gunshot wounds in various parts of the body. Lieutenant Bungaos was my classmate from the Philippine Military Academy, class of 1999, and a close friend. He sustained 7 gunshot wounds, including 1 in the head and another in the chest. The firefight lasted for almost 2 hours. When they recovered his body, kahit wala na yung baril niya, naka-trigger finger pa rin ang posisyon niya. He died fighting till his last breath gave out. Our helicopter unit recovered his remains and those of his soldiers from Bohol and brought it to Mactan Air Base, Cebu. This is where I will make it more personal. Alam niyo po, nung nakita po namin ang kanyang katawan, basag na po ang kanyang bungo. His right arm was barely hanging from his shoulder. Usually po, pag namamatay ang isang Army officer, he is assigned a survivor officer also from the Philippine Army. But in this particular case, probably because I was there the moment his body was brought to the airbase, I was assigned an Air Force officer to be his survivor officer. Since that day, in March 8, 2003, until he was buried in March 19, I never left his side. Yun na lang siguro ang magagawa ko sa aking mista at sa aking kaibigan. Pero alam niyo po ang nakakalungkot dito? Ronnie had been married only for 11 months. His son, then only 5 months, was due to be baptized 15 days after March 8. Bibinyagan pa lang sana ang kanyang anak. By this time, he would have been married for 13 years, a major of 38 years old, and a proud son to a 12-year-old. Pero hindi na po nangyari yan. Namatay po siya sa Mabini, Bohol, no less than the hometown of his very own mother. Yung pong kwento ko takes a very curious turn. Dahil bago po nangyari yung ambush in 2000 and in 2003, meron pong kwento ang isang dating PC lieutenant na ngayon general na sa PNP tungkol sa isang nagngangalang Roy Erecre. Roy Erecre was arrested in early 1986 in Barangay Cabanbanan, Dimiao, Bohol, after a raid on a hut where armed rebels were conducting a teach-in. 4 of his companions jumped out the window and were instantly killed. 3 others were able to escape. Erecre and a woman, both unarmed, were inside with raised hands. Their cover story was that they were conducting research for their master's studies in the University of San Carlos, and they were held against their will by the armed men. They were grateful that they were rescued by the PC lieutenant. Itatago na lang natin siya sa pangalang Lieutenant June. Erecre and his companion had IDs to show that they were students of the University of San Carlos Graduate School. Needless to say, the PC lieutenant was given a commendation for supposedly saving Erecre and his companion from the NPAs. And after so much funfair, Lieutenant June was ordered by his provincial commander to release them. When the Bohol Peace Panel was convened for the 1986 talks after President Cory Aquino rose to power, imagine the surprise of Lieutenant June and his soldiers when they saw in the Bohol capital that Erecre was sitting as the head of the NPA panel with Ranulfo Macadini, alias Kaalay, the head of the Bohol NPA, as his co-chairman. Lieutenant June's platoon sergeant could not help but remark to his platoon leader, "Sabi ko na sa inyo, sir, we should have killed them." To which Lieutenant June simply replied, "Sergeant, we are not criminals or murderers. We are soldiers." Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues, yun lang naman sana po ang hinihingi ko. Soldiers are expected to lay their lives on the line and in that course, lay the ultimate sacrifice in the altar of freedom. Pero bakit pa naman po kailangan pang basagin ang bungo nila, barilin pa sila at close range? Do they not deserve a more merciful end? A soldier's death, as they say. Pero hindi po. So imagine my great surprise when I receive a report from official channels. Nung natanggap ko po itong ulat na ito, I could only say, the mills of God grind slowly, but heaven's vengeance is slow but sure. According to that report, combined elements of the Eastern Mindanao Command CIDG-11, Army and AFP intelligence operatives, and the Davao Police arrested no less than Roy Erecre, alias Toto, alias Pasyong, the Secretary of the Central Visayas Regional Committee of the CPP-NPA. He was arrested in Sasa District, Davao City at around 11 a.m., May 7, 2014. He was arrested with his girlfriend, a married woman named Judith Haron Niog, while the duo were island hopping in the different beaches and tourist destinations in the region. Unbeknownst to the couple, they have already been tailed several days before by combined police and army intelligence operatives. Erecre was arrested by virtue of several unbailable warrants of arrest from regional trial courts in Cebu and Bohol for atrocities against civilians and government forces in Bohol in the late 1990s and early 2000. He also led the ambush which killed the late Lieutenant Socrates and Lieutenant Ronnie Bungaos separately in 2000 and 2003. Which brings to mind, Erecre will have to explain to his comrades in the Communist Party why he is in the beaches and hotels of Davao City with a very much married woman, while the Communist Party is in the midst of filling a leadership vacuum. Mr. Speaker, minamahal kong mga kasama, to me, this story is really surreal. Sabi nga nila, you may run and you may hide, but the long arm of the law will catch up with you. Si Lieutenant Ronnie Bungaos po, tubong Davao, pamilya niya nakatira sa Sasa District, Davao City. The very same place na nahuli po ang pumatay sa kanya, si Roy Erecre. I'm simply waiting for the CPP-NPA to declare in a similar fashion that they declared when the Chamzon couple was captured in Cebu, ng mga Chamzon daw ay na nagsusupervise lamang ng reconstruction projects para sa Yolanda. I am fully expecting that they will declare Erecre was on duty to inspect, I don't know, probably anti-poverty projects. But ladies and gentlemen, I may be for the peace process with the left, but I will resist any efforts to include the Chamzons, and this time, Roy Erecre, in the JSIG list para lang po makapag-participate sila sa peace talks. Tututulan po natin yan. And now that he is behind bars, I say to the 14 soldiers who died in the hands of Roy Erecre and his cohorts, to my fellow peer mayors, the late Lieutenant Socrates and my nista, Lieutenant Ronnie Bungaos, rest in peace. Justice is at hand. Maraming salamat po, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, my dear colleagues.
Floor leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we refer the speech of the Honorable Acedillo to the appropriate committee.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.